It is my honor now to introduce our keynote speaker. It is more than an honor to introduce the keynote speaker for our 2019 commencement. It is a joy. Rare are the moments when we have someone in our midst who embodies at an exceptional level all of the values we strive to instill within our students. In a time when HBCUs are being questioned and challenged, it is reaffirming to have a graduate of an HBCU to speak to the graduates of this HBCU to remind our students of the potential they have to set the world on fire, not tomorrow and long in the future, but starting today. Bakari Sellers made history in 2006 when, at just 22 years old, he defeated a 26-year incumbent state representative to become the youngest member of the South Carolina state legislature and the youngest African-American elected official in the nation. He was only 1 year from having graduated from Morehouse College when he made history. He served as a legislator from 2006 to 2014 and was extremely effective in passing legislation that made a difference in the lives of the people of South Carolina. Like some of you, he understood that a bachelor's degree was not enough and attended law school at the University of South Carolina while serving in the legislature. He went on to work for very influential political figures like U.S. Congressman James Clyburn and former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin. He now practices law for Strum Law Firm in South Carolina. However, the world knows Mr. Seller most for his work as a political commentator for CNN. His insightful, thoughtful, and calm articulation of viewpoints sets him apart from others. He brings a fresh and insightful perspective to a process that can at times be stale and narrow-minded. He understands that words are not bombs to be detonated in the midst of those who disagree with you, but precision instruments that can separate fact from fiction, exactness from hyperbole, and truth from opinions masquerading as facts. Our keynote speaker uses words in an eloquent and articulate manner, and our political discourse is enhanced because of his presence. Bakari Sellers is a progressive voice for change, a politician and political commentator who does not suffer from historical and social amnesia. He is a child of the civil rights movement. His father was a social activist and protester in connection with the Orangeburg Massacre, which occurred in 1968, when a civil rights protest at South Carolina State University, another HBCU, turned deadly after highway patrolmen opened fire on about 200 unarmed black student protesters. 3 young men were shot and killed, and 28 people were wounded. Bakari carries this legacy of pain and protest, and also he carries this mandate of being a voice for change. In a documentary about his run for lieutenant governor in South Carolina entitled "While I Breathe, I Hope," he demonstrates the tragic historical and personal connection between the Orangeburg Massacre and the deadly massacre in 2015 at Mother Bethel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. It is this cycle of violence, hatred, and human insensitivity that he has dedicated his life to ending. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today a voice crying out in the political wilderness of America, trying to make the paths to truth, justice, and love straight. It is with joy we bring forth Attorney Bakari Sellers.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Before I begin, I think that it is necessary that we thank those who don't often get thanked enough, and I know that we've thanked the faculty and the Board of Trustees, we've thanked everybody in the room, but I think this institution would not be going in the direction it's going without the leadership of its great president. So, class of 2019 and all others, please give Dr. Hall a round of applause. I was also told by his wife, if you didn't clap, then y'all were getting your degrees taken back. So I have to thank Delegate Plaskett for inviting me, and former Delegate Christensen for inviting me. Last night, I am counting these because they've been rare, but I got my second quality night's sleep. I'm the father of 4.5-month-old twins. And although my wife, y'all oohing and ahhing, y'all can babysit if you want to. Last night, my wife did call me during every feeding, but I am happy to report that I did get a little bit of rest last night, so thank you. I am more than pleased to be here with you all today, and I promise you all, because today is not about me or anybody on this stage, it's about everyone that's here before me. But I'm going to treat you all today, Governor, a lot like Elizabeth Taylor treated all 7 of her husbands, and that means I'm not going to keep you long. But I also received some other advice which I believe to be prudent at this moment, and I think that it's necessary whenever elected officials, all of those behind me who were speaking after me, it's the 5 B's. Be brief, brother, be brief. And so I will begin my remarks now. You know, it's a great honor to be here today and share in this celebration, but also offer my heartfelt congratulations to this class of 2019. I always say to the family and friends who join us today, congratulations, because I firmly believe that this is about you all as much as it is about the graduates. Many grandmothers in the audience and mothers, many grandfathers and aunts and uncles have spent many nights praying on their knees to make sure that you all would walk across this stage. And so today, their prayers are being answered. I'm reminded that I had a 4.0 in college through freshman orientation. And had it been up to me, I wouldn't have attended my own graduation. However, my mother made it clear that it was not up to me, saying that she would be attending the ceremony with or without me, though she strongly advised the former, as the latter would have serious consequences. But the truth is that because of all of you all's love and support, all of your encouragement, these young men and women, and I see we have some that are young at heart, you've done something truly remarkable. So share today in this celebration and share at all future triumphs, because this commencement is not the end of anything. It is just the beginning. And it may be hard to believe, but to those of you all who have parents in the room, you need to know that they weren't always like they are now. In fact, I believe many of your parents were probably pretty fun and pretty cool, spontaneous people before you got here. I know that they were engaging conversationalists in riots at parties, but you made them their boring selves. So for God's sakes, as I told the provost yesterday, is it too much to ask for you to call your mother every once in a while because she worries about you? To the graduates, let me just tell you, job well done. Let me congratulate you on this achievement. You've realized a success that has been years in the making, and this is a very rare and special moment, so I want you to enjoy it. I want you to cherish this feeling of accomplishment and confidence, because let me tell you, it slips away. It slips away when you're not looking, and there are many of us who would say to ourselves right now, I would give anything to go back to college. It slips away when you're not looking, and it's impossible to get back. But even more importantly, we now live in a culture of low expectation, and oftentimes you get what you expect, but our expectations of you are extremely high. Don't look at us. You did that to yourselves. It's my privilege to join with you today. It's an important day, and I bring you congratulations from my hometown of Denmark, South Carolina. It's a big city where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. But I've always been told that great things come from modest beginnings. As Dr. Hall was here and he was telling you a story about a young man who was born at 633 Frederick Street, I decided I would share with you a little bit more. You see, my father was born at 633 Frederick Street in this big city of Denmark. And after he graduated for what was known as Voorhees High School, he went to Howard University. But when he was 10 years old, something happened that fundamentally changed the trajectory of his life. When he was 10 years old, he would always say that the strongest woman that he ever knew of was a young lady named Mrs. Till. Now, he said that Mrs. Till was so strong because when he was 10 years old, Emmett Till, her son, was found brutally lynched and beaten in the bottom of a Mississippi River. His face was like a pancake because it had no more bones intact. But Mrs. Till decided that she was going to have an open casket, and it lay out in front of a church, much like the arena that we're in today. And she was so strong because she wanted the world to see what hate and bigotry and racism had done to her son. In fact, I don't know if many of you all remember, but Jet Magazine used to keep these pictures. For me, I remember the pictures because they were right next to the beauty of the week, but I digress. And this young man from Denmark, my father, he ripped out the picture of Emmett Till and he folded it up and he put it in his wallet, and it helped spur on his movement. He led sit-ins and demonstrations before he went to Howard, and his parents, my grandparents, they were afraid of not only his safety and security, but their economic safety and security as well. And so when they sent him to Howard, they sent him there to this historically black college in Washington, D.C. Dr. Hall, you may find this funny. They sent him to Howard University because they wanted him to get away from the movement. They wanted to take him out the struggle. But when he got to Howard, he befriended a man named Stokely Carmichael. The irony in this story is that Stokely graduated from Howard, but then convinced my father to drop out of school, and so he did. He dropped out of school and he helped start this little fledgling organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They got paid $8 a week. And in 1964, it was his first mission. He went to Miami University of Ohio, where they were training workers to go down to Mississippi. And their task when they got to Mississippi was to register voters. But when he got down there, his task was a little bit different. He was in charge of a rescue mission. He was looking for the bodies of 3 of his fellow slain civil rights workers, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. During the day, they would hide in barns and sheds, and at night they would go out and look in ditches and trenches, and ironically enough, they helped find these bodies behind the home of one of the local sheriff's deputies and ministers in the town named Edgar Ray Killen. That was my father's first indoctrination into the civil rights movement until he came home to South Carolina. And when he came home to South Carolina, he became involved in the most deadly civil rights demonstration this country has ever seen. You see, on the night of February 6, 1968, the students at South Carolina State College decided they were going to protest the All-Star Bowling Alley, which still sits there today. It sits in a right angle. In fact, the history books call it Jim Crow's final hiding place, the last vestige of discrimination. And the students went down, and it sits in a right angle, and the students went down, and they began to clap and chant and sing these protest hymns. And when they began to clap and chant and sing these protest hymns, law enforcement began to surround many of the students, and as they were in this right angle, they began to press up against the students, and the students began to press up against the glass. And as they pressed up against the glass broke, and the proverbial all hell broke loose. And law enforcement began to beat many of the students, but they beat them not with normal police batons, but they beat them with batons that were about this long, and at the end they had these leather rawhide whips. That night, the students had to go back to their dormitories, had to go back to their campus and heal not only their physical wounds, but their emotional wounds and mental wounds as well. And then came February 7th. And I think older people have a saying that the tension was so thick that you can cut it with a knife. But nothing happened that day. And then came that fateful day of February 8th, 1968, when the students went back down to the bowling alley to protest, but this time when law enforcement came, they got the right idea and they went back to their campus. They went back to their campus. They went back to their campus. And they built this huge bonfire. And as you can probably imagine down here in the islands, February, it's not too cold, it may get a little cool, but the bonfire, the embers would illuminate the darkness and the warmth from the fire would warm your bones ever so gently, but the students could not have imagined what would happen next. They didn't imagine that South Carolina state troopers would line up along the embankment in front of their beloved campus. They didn't imagine that they would close ranks like they did. They couldn't foresee that those state troopers would have shotguns that were loaded with deadly double-aught buckshots, or the same bullets we used to hunt deer, and they could not foresee that those shotguns would be turned on them with deadly intent. And for 8 seconds, 1001, 1002, 1003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shots were fired into the group of students. It killed 3, Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton. It wounded another 28. My father was actually shot in the shoulder that night. And he went to the infirmary, but when he got to the infirmary, they told him there was nothing they could do for him there. He had to go to the hospital, and they packed him up and took him to the hospital. When he got to the hospital, he was pointed out by the only black sheriff's deputy in Orangeburg County at the time, and he was arrested. He was arrested and deemed to be an outside agitator. He was charged with 5 felony counts, looking at a maximum of 75 years in prison. In between the time of the Orangeburg Massacre on February 8, 1968, and the time of my father's trial, all 9 officers who fired shots into the group of students were tried, and all 9 officers were found not guilty. It's amazing how history repeats itself. But my father went to trial, and the lead investigator said that they had misplaced evidence, but he did remember that young man from Denmark standing on top of a fire truck, lighting a bic and saying, "Burn, baby, burn." And so the indictment was backdated from February 8th to February 6th, and he was charged, tried, and convicted of rioting, becoming the first and only one-man riot in the history of this country. You know, on that night, injustice had left mothers without their sons. It left the pages of my state's history stained red with blood. But if you look at my father today and you ask him what's the greatest sacrifice he had to make, he'll tell you the greatest sacrifice he had to make was not necessarily being in jail or losing his freedom per se, but it was being in jail for the birth of his oldest daughter, or my big sister. You know, the reason that I share this story with you all today, and I talk about the legacies of people like Emmett Till and Henry Smith and Samuel Hammond and Delano Middleton, is for 2 reasons. The first is because I think that you all understand. As we acknowledge and clap and stand up and sing praises of joy for all of those individuals who were here, we have to first recognize, even more importantly, that we stand on the shoulders, even in your caps and gowns, of heroes and sheroes who made it possible for us to be here today. And I oftentimes think about my father when I think about the fact that this story reminds me of what's possible when a prepared mind and body finds opportunity. And just like my father, he refuses to quit. But I can honestly tell you, I've never seen a class, and I've spoken at many generations or graduations, that have gone through as much as you all have. Because I truly believe that when you're resilient, when you are determined, when you are phenomenal, absolutely anything is possible. Of course, we talk about the fact that that intersection of opportunity and timing is exceedingly rare in life. That sort of resilience and determination is rare, it's phenomenal, but even more importantly, so are you. I want you to remember, though, as Dr. Hall said, you are not alone. In fact, this entire institution is based on that intersection that we talk about. We have to acknowledge those shoulders upon which we stand. And even as we talk about 1968, we have to remember spring of 1962. The mainland United States, it had exploded in its struggle for civil rights, and freedom riders are on the roads. And voter registration efforts are underway across the South, and particularly Mississippi. Organizers for SNCC, along with my father and many others, have occupied the Attorney General's office to protest the illegal imprisonment of civil rights demonstrators in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We all remember how the FBI infiltrated different civil rights organizations. And we were just a few months away from James Meredith becoming the first black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. Imagine being so powerful that that one man, he would spark riots so violent that President Kennedy had to mobilize the army to restore order. It's amidst this whirlwind that we remember that a 54-year-old son of Jewish Lithuanian immigrants, just a year into his first term as the Virgin Islands' 9th civilian governor, decides to build an institution. That institution built for the stimulation and utilization of intellectual resources for the people of the Virgin Islands. Never mind the fact that this was a bold step for equality at the time when such actions were too often rewarded with hateful and violent pushback. Never mind we're talking about a fixture of permanence in the heart of the hurricane belt where a storm can come ashore and release so much energy in one day as the explosion of 500,000 small atomic bombs. Amazingly, it still didn't knock this class of 2019 off course. Never mind how astounding and audacious it must have seemed. It was an idea whose time had come, and so he persisted. And so they persisted. And so you still persist today. And here we are, on this gymnasium, on this day, resilient, determined, and phenomenal. And you may say, and I get this all the time when I speak, that you talk about history so much. And that was over half a century ago. Do you really want us to believe that we are what they had in mind? Do you really think that people who helped start this institution, that class right behind you that's celebrating 50 years, all three of them, wave at them, wave at the folk. Yeah, y'all wave at them. Do you really believe that those individuals who are celebrating 50 years would have an idea that you all would be sitting in these chairs and standing here today? And the answer to that is yes, they did. Of course, they did. In fact, I know they did. You know, I go back to the New York Times on February 15th, 1960. It was 2 weeks after the Greensboro Four sat down at a Woolworth's lunch counter and started a sit-in movement that would spread across the country like wildfire. The newspaper that day, what it said about these four young people from another historically black college, North Carolina A&T State University, it said that the demonstrations were generally dismissed at first as another college fad. But soon that opinion, it lost adherence, and however the movement, it spread from North Carolina to Virginia, Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee, and involved 15 cities. Some whites wrote off the episodes as the work of outside agitators, but then they even conceded that these seeds of dissent had fallen into fertile soil. If you don't remember anything else today, and here I go sounding like a pastor, remember or mark your pages that the seeds of dissent had fallen into fertile soil. So yes, I think that you are exactly what they had in mind, because this university is fertile soil. This is the intersection of timing and training. This is the fertile soil, and you, my friends, are the seeds of dissent. And look, I know I was joking with the governor, who, by the way, is one cool dude. I was joking with the governor as we were talking about what we would say, and you know it's the tradition of the commencement speaker to impart some wisdom on you all, and some wisdom to the graduating class that prepares you for the future that lies before you, and that means I'm supposed to give you some advice on what you should do with your life. But I honestly only have one piece of advice, and that is that you shouldn't take advice from people who tell you what you should do with your life. The best thing that I can tell you to do is find something that you love to do, work like hell to get good at it, and somebody's bound to pay you for it. I want you to also remember this. I haven't been here that long, but in my 34 years of great wisdom, I know that life isn't fair. From birth, children of wealth, privilege, and position have an unfair advantage over their peers. It's a fact of life. In fact, it's commonplace in America for one individual to do absolutely nothing and contribute nothing to our society and be held a visionary while amassing a fortune, while another labors endlessly to scrape out the barest of existence and be considered lazy and a burden for his efforts. Life is not just. It's not fair. It never was, and anybody who tells you that it is trying to sell you something. But the fact of life in and of itself should not be cause for hopelessness and cynicism, especially not today, because you are proof of a different fact, that while life isn't fair, it ain't fixed either. You are living, breathing examples that the age of miracles has not passed, that this is the land of opportunity, even if you have to work longer and harder to find it. Remember, you are the seeds of descent fallen upon this fertile soil at this intersection of timing and training. You are resilient, determined, and phenomenal. And also, you possess the single greatest catalyst for success and change there ever was, because now you have an educated mind, and now is your chance to use it. There's a famous quote that says, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum upon which to place it, and I shall move the world." You see, the foundation is your fulcrum and your choice, the lever, and with those things you can move the world. You stand today on the shoulders of all of those who came before you. With the knowledge and opportunity at your fingertips today, you can fulfill their promise. You can realize our more perfect union. And if you can't believe it in yourself, then believe it in me. Because I oftentimes think about the first time my father saw his daughter or my sister and remember that it was through the prison glass that he had to sit at Columbia Correctional Institute after being convicted of a riot that never happened. You see, that's what happened to the agitator and the radicals in South Carolina. I don't even think about the fact that he was housed on death row and all of those other things, but the perseverance to see it through. But look at where I'm standing now in just one generation. Look at the fact that the agitator's son became the youngest black legislator in the entire country. Then a nominee for lieutenant governor. I didn't win no lieutenant governor, but that's okay. And now an analyst and contributor for the largest news organization in the world. In one generation, I tell you that because life is not fair. What my father went through was not fair. It was not just, but life ain't fixed either. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to dare greatly and fail. Don't be afraid to aim high and fall short. Don't be afraid to be the miracles that you already are. Don't be afraid to pioneer new technologies to revolutionize education or business or agriculture or healthcare. Don't be afraid to lead a new generation of young people that understands you don't have to be a celebrity to be a hero. And don't be afraid to be that ripple of change, because I'm looking for you not to be just heroes on the islands, but I'm looking for you to be heroes throughout this entire country. And as you leave here today, go with that knowledge and tradition that dares you to be more than you've ever imagined. And stand with audacious hope and stand proud, and we will stand with you. Don't forget to call your mother because she worries about you. Thank you, and remember, in the words of the great American poet, Nipsey Hussle, the marathon continues. Thank you, and God bless you all.